Love and health form the foundation and pillars that support all that you do to create fulfillment and success in every aspect of your life. Love within us guides our paths while our health enables us to drive forward. The two are inseparable and vital for growth and reaching your fullest potential. Welcome to Love and Health in America with Dr. Doohi Lee, Mary McMahon, and Jens Johnson. Dr. Lee is an international speaker, author, inventor of the Diamond Matrix, and medical director of Advanced Surgical Arts. Mary McMahon is a certified financial planner professional committed to maximizing your financial success. And Jens Johnson, the Mindset Master, is a best-selling author, speaker, mastermind facilitator, and success mindset coach. They are committed to help you succeed by optimizing your health, finances, and relationships. Please join them and explore all the facets of love and health to achieve and live your abundant life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Doohi Lee, Mary McMahon, and Jens Johnson.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Doohi Lee, coming to you once again from our episode of Love and Health in America. I missed the last episode, and I know Mary and Jens had a great time talking about various aspects of finances and all those kind of things. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sorry I missed it. I had a couple of some emergencies in my clinic, and it was one of those days. But made sure I try to come here today and talk about some interesting things. So before the show, Jens and I were talking about some various things that are going on around the world, and I think we're all inundated into this period of adjustment and change. I think there's almost like a tsunami of changes that are going on, and how do we actually manage this and survive, perhaps, and maybe even thrive. And the idea of thriving in times of adversity comes down to, at least for me, is the idea of the ability to think. The ability to have your brain healthy and in check, and using the powers of thought and reason and logic to get you through the quagmire of the kind of information and misinformation kind of things that are going on. And I think we're really in the middle, very, very deeply in the middle of all this. So I'd like to kind of title this episode as Suspension of Belief. Not suspension of disbelief, but suspension of belief. And I think this is kind of what's really going on, and that's been kind of being forced on us to actually do this. And the idea of belief is not necessarily what we know personally to be factual or whatnot, but we're being forced to suspend that. The idea that we have the ability to have critical thinking, ability to see things and make some critical judgments and make some decisions that are vital to survival of not only ourselves but also to our loved ones and our friends, neighbors, et cetera, and you can expand all the way to the entire country, because that one belief can expand almost infinitely. So the idea of suspending your belief and actually is being forced upon us, and that's the kind of things I think we're going to talk about today. Have some discussion between the two of us, because both of us are going through a lot of this process ourselves, both personally and professionally, and really kind of figure out maybe some ideas of how do we actually maintain that strength? How do you actually maintain the strength and the core belief that you have of knowing what is truly right? We all know this. We all know as human beings, I think vast majority of human beings know what is right and what is wrong. And otherwise we would not have laws, we would not have ethics, we would not have the ideas of right and wrong and kind of things that we do on a daily basis without necessarily being told. And a lot of these things are innate. And when you're actually being forced to change this or alter this, or being told whatever you believe is right is now wrong for whatever reason, or sometimes there's no reason, and the question has to do with how do you accept that situation? Do you fall back and say, yeah, you're right, I should just forget about everything I used to believe and follow you? Or do we find out and say, okay, I understand this different thought that's coming up. How do I deal with this? And that, I think, really is the fundamental basis of the crisis that we're going through. There's so many of us that I see that are kind of sort of falling down, let's say. And I'm speaking, as a doctor and also as a human being, dealing with people, my patients that I've treated. I've treated. I was just telling Jens before the show started. I've treated hundreds of patients for COVID. And you kind of forget how many. I mean, you just kind of roll through it, and you kind of look back. It's like, oh wow, there's just so many people of various stages of illnesses and diseases that we go through. And I got them through, knock on wood, they've all done well. So question has to do with, how do I, as a professional, guide my patients to see things a certain way and to accept my, prescriptions, let's say the medications, but not only that, but also the behaviors that they need to have to stay healthy and do the healthy things. And these are the kind of things that they have to understand and believe in me as a physician to tell them what I, wish and know to be the best for them. And that is my job as a professional, as a physician, to guide them through their illnesses. But they have to have the understanding as well to know that, okay, what he is saying makes sense. They have to have the judgment. Otherwise, they would not be able to, jump into the pathway of health and the prescriptions. And the pathway of healing is never always easy. Sometimes it's fairly simple, but usually it's very difficult. You're going through the physical and emotional difficulties of just being sick. At the same time, you got to do these different things, taking terrible medicines or whatever, going through the side effects. You have to change your behavior. All the different things have to happen to get well. But at the core of all this is belief. You have to understand and really accept the fact that the ideas that are being presented to you as a patient by a doctor that you trust make sense. So if you can turn that around into what we're going through as society at large with what's going on with the masks, the mandate, the vaccines. Now we're having the vaccine mandate to little children and all those kind of things. So I'm not here to preach to you what I think is right or wrong, because we all can make those decisions on ourselves. But what I want to do is help you start thinking about how do you turn on your critical thinking? How do you, come up with the fortitude to understand and say, I believe this to be right. So how do I, find the reasons to say this makes sense, this does not make any sense? And where does the narrative that is sort of manipulating and sometimes forcing, really, us to think a certain way, where is that coming from? And understand the basis of that thought and find out, okay, how does that line of thinking mesh with what I believe to be true? And I think this is where the conflict really lies. And I think once you go through that exercise of critically thinking about the direction of the other ideas and where the foundation of those ideas are coming from, and how does that mesh with, let's say, for me personally, my own beliefs of what I think is right or wrong personally and as a medical professional, then for me, that's the process I went through to make some decisions about myself and also the decisions I made in order to treat my patients, And I think that really is sort of the crux of the issue. And of course, Jens has plenty of experience in that arena as well. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to talk about this afternoon.
Well, I think that you really touched on a ton of great points, but the one I'm going to hone in on is the critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think to myself, how did I get to be where I am right now, where I had two parents mm-hmm. that didn't get divorced. Mm-hmm. We had 6 kids in the family. We were raised in a faith-based mm-hmm. home. Yeah. So, when you talk about suspending your belief, when you're raised in any faith, I don't care what the faith is, but when you're raised in any faith, you learn convictions. Yes. And convictions are so much stronger than beliefs because, like you said, we were taught right from wrong. Mm-hmm. So you've got a strong family unit. And let me tell you what, my family was not perfect.
Nobody is.
Far from it. There were 6 kids in our family. Yeah. You had to fight for your right to speak. Uh-huh. It was mayhem. My parents struggled. There were many times that my parents discussed getting a divorce. And I'm just going to say my mom, because my dad said, no, I don't believe in divorce. We're never going to get divorced. We're going to work through whatever it is we're going to work through. So it wasn't easy, but we always, my parents were both huge into education. My mom had a master's degree. My dad had a master's degree. My mom was a teacher by profession. And my parents taught us to think critically.
Exactly.
And we would have conversations and we would talk. We didn't have the social media. Sure. We didn't sit in front of TVs all day long. We had conversations. And I can remember, talking to my mom for hours and hours and hours. And I didn't always believe everything that she believed, but you question. you learn to question, and we're living in a society now where just the concept of critical thinking people aren't discussing.
You're vilified.
Exactly.
You're vilified for
You
raising your
are.
hand and saying, what about this? What about that?
Right, exactly. You truly are. You're bullied. You're abused. But I think that I still believe there's more people like us here in the United States than and really across
around
the
the world.
world,
Yeah.
where people they want to have their critical thinking, because that's what separates us from the
Exactly.
rest of the animal
Exactly.
kingdom.
Without that, we would not be surviving.
No, and I think that everyday people, we have to stand up. We have to use these platforms. It's one of the reasons why I love the platform of podcasting, because listen, anybody can do this. Now, we're not professionals
That's right.
in this whatsoever, but we have a passion for our country, and we have a passion for people. And what we do is we want to make this world a better place. And we understand that, I don't care so much about how somebody gets to the thought process that they get to, but what I care about is that they do their research.
Exactly.
That they read, that they talk to other physicians. Even one of the things we were talking about before the show is just the simple fact of how important it is that you build a strong relationship with the physician
Yes.
while you're healthy.
Yes.
Not when you get sick. It's while
Well, you have a
you're-
relationship then, but it's a little different.
well, it's really points where, I can remember growing up, my mom was great friends with our pediatrician.
Yeah,
My mom was great friends with the GP. The people at the office, they knew us.
Yeah.
And just all of that is, we're going away from it. And there's people like us, and again, I think there's more than the opposite. But we have to stand up, and we have to talk about the other narrative, and we have to say, hey, it's not right for people to blindly follow anything. It's not right for anyone to take freedom away
Exactly,
from you.
exactly.
And we have to constantly say that. And there shouldn't be mandates on our health. That's crazy.
Yeah,
And what
yeah.
blows my mind on that is, if they're going to I'm not for any mandates, but if they were going to mandate anything, how about mandating eating right and
Exactly,
exercising?
I know.
But I still don't think that's right. I mean, but it's cuckoo. It's cuckoo thinking to me.
It really is. It really is. And also, I think if you understand the foundation of these mandates, on the surface, they sound like they're for you. Actually, if you look down deeper, it's not. It's completely the opposite. It really is about controlling and manipulating. And that's what I oppose. I mean, I understand there's certain laws that make sense and whatever. I mean, I think when people bring up seatbelt law, oh, yeah, well, look at our seatbelts. But yeah, I'm sure seatbelts are great. I mean, when I first started learning to drive, there were no seatbelt laws. Tells you how old I am. But so when I started actually finally getting used to wearing the seatbelts, I kind of like this. Before I drove without wearing anything. It was very, very different. But there was some logic behind that. There were certainly fights about that law as well. It's like, why are you mandating people to do certain things? I certainly understand those kind of reasons, and we can go back to that. It's neither here nor there. But it's the same idea behind this so-called mandates for vaccines. But wearing a seatbelt is one thing. It's one thing else to completely fundamentally change the status of your health. And that really is the crux of the whole issue. It's not necessarily the mandates. It's like, what is the significance of this mandate? What are the long-term effects? And how it's going to affect you as a person for the rest of your life, as well as your loved ones, et cetera. And as we now progress with the mandates going down to children who really have no voice, other than, the voice of parents, who are, again, swayed, or dissuaded one way or the other based on who they listen to, because most of these people have suspended their thinking. And that really is the tragedy that I see, is that people who have the power to make the correct decisions, the power to do the research, to do the study, really delve into why certain things are happening. Everybody talks about conspiracy theorists. now everything's like, well, either you believe me or you don't. If you don't believe me, you're this. Like this poor gentleman who went to the school board in South Texas and was labeled a domestic terrorist and arrested, literally. I mean, thrown down on the ground and arrested and thrown in jail. I mean, why? Because he raised an opposition to the school board. Well, this is our job. We're supposed to question the things that are happening, to us and to our children. That is the foundation of this country. It's called freedom of speech.
That's exactly right.
It is
That's
our
right.
duty.
It's right.
It is our duty as a citizen to question the rulers, quote unquote, the people who, they're not rulers, they're people who we elected to represent our desires. Okay,
Right.
of course that gets twisted and they take control. That control was never a part of the bargain, okay? But these people are doing, and that's the transformation you're going through, and going through it in a way that is very, very frightening. It's because being done in a slow way that people do not really feel the pain. And eventually we're going to be at a place where you really can't even escape anymore, and that really is a problem. And it really is, I'm not trying to say all these things because, I want to dissuade anybody, but also what I really want to do is have people listen to this and think, okay, why is he saying this? Well, I grew up in a country that really it's dictatorship. It wasn't quite as bad as, communist China or whatever that we have now, but it was not a free society like the United States. So when I came here, life was very, very different. And I was young enough where I didn't know that much of the difference, but as I grew older and I learned about, the various differences, I thought, wow, what I could have gone through had I stayed in Korea at that time. Now things are a little different, but back then, it was a very, very different life, and my wife, she lived through a cultural revolution. She knows exactly what's happening in this country now. 'Cause she lived through it. It's like people have no clue.
Right.
People have absolutely no clue what they're going through right now.
Yeah, we
And,
have lived such a blessed life.
Well, it's actually cloistered,
And people take
and
it for
protected
granted.
life.
And it's like people take it for granted that, to your point, what you just said is it's happening so slowly that people don't even realize it. They don't understand. But then it goes back to also the education system. It goes back to the breakdown of the family unit. It goes back to, taking charge. It goes back to living in faith. And, listen, we have to go to church. I don't care what church you go to.
Go to one.
You got to go to church.
Yeah.
I mean, the churches are dying. The attendance at churches are going down. One of the other podcasts I do is Monday through Friday. It's Wake Up in the Word, and it's because a friend of mine who is a pastor, and it was during COVID,
Right.
And I thought, well, where are people going to congregate to get that spiritual strength from?
Yeah.
And this is definitely something that, what you just said, you came from a country that wasn't free. Your wife came from a country that wasn't free.
Still isn't.
And you see it. And that's what blows my mind is, how can somebody question what your experience has been and knowing all the signs, and people don't want to say, well, let me do some research. Let me think about that. That's what blows my mind.
Exactly. That really is this astounding thing. Then it's not just me. I mean, we have millions of people who are immigrants who came from countries like this, and we're all saying this is crazy. Why are Americans, the natives who were born here, following this path? Because we all know exactly where it leads. We've lived through it. And in fact, these countries are still living examples of what happened.
Right.
Cuba, China, Venezuela. I mean, this happened during really recent lifetimes, right? It's not something that foreign that people have no clues about.
Right.
But this is the path that we're taking, and we're taking it willingly. And that is what is most astounding thing is, why are we literally marching to our own demise, knowing where we're going to go? I mean, there's no escape from this.
Right.
And the idea of, getting the strength to stand up together and say, no, enough's enough. When are you going to say these mandates are enough? I mean, I don't know. I mean, does somebody in your family has to die, or maybe a child that you have has to get maimed or disabled for life? Or, I mean, is that enough at that point? You're going to rise up and say, okay, that's enough? Or when is that? I mean, or are we going to say, well, it doesn't matter because, the government knows everything and I'm just going to follow the government? Or, I mean, there's so many different attitudes to this. And that is what is really the frustrating thing is, if you actually sat back and thought about, okay, how is this affecting me in my life and my loved ones, my children? And what is the direction of the mandate, where it's coming from? It's really that simple, those kind of simple questions. And what is the basis of them trying to protect my family and my children by, mandating sort of things that are safe for you or whatever. And I'm not telling people to go and get the vaccine or not. Just do your own research. I think if you actually do the critical thinking, logical thinking, a step by thought, I think the conclusion is pretty obvious.
But you know what I think? I think that we are living in a time where people are more self-centered than
Very
ever
much so.
before.
Sure.
And so you've got people that if their life isn't impacted, like you just said, then
They don't really care.
they don't care.
Yeah.
And instead of looking out and saying, look, but it doesn't matter if your life isn't impacted, if our country is going down a road where freedoms and liberties are being taken away.
It will be impacted whether you want it or
and to
not.
your point, what you said, and people that are going to school board meetings that are being arrested because they want to just stand up and say, I don't want masturbation and pedophilia taught
Hardcore sex.
to my
Yeah.
children.
Children, yeah.
You know, that's what's so insane is public schools here in the state of Texas have books that talk about pedophilia like it's normal, and you have parents that are saying, but I don't want my children to be taught that way. And they're getting accosted. So it's more people have to say, maybe it's not impacting me directly right now, this minute,
Right.
but it's going to.
Sure, it will.
It's going to
It will.
impact you, and it's going to
Sure.
impact your kids, and it's going to impact your grandkids. And, I've read many places how it takes 100 years to really transform a society. And, as we were discussing, we're like 60
some
70
years,
years into
Yeah.
it.
2/3 of the way,
And
yeah.
what is going to happen to our grandkids? And what can we do now? I mean, that's what, listen, I'm the mindset master, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
all about pre-planning.
Exactly.
Because we can make a difference.
Right.
We 100% can make a difference, but we can't make a difference if we don't do anything.
Right, exactly.
We have to
exactly
do
right.
something.
No, you have to, and that's the thing. And the basis of doing something starts with a thought. Because you have to have a direction of some activity, right? And action just
Absolutely.
cannot happen out of nothing.
Right.
And that really is the whole basis of all this. And you can sit there and rail against the reverse discrimination, which is what's happening. What I see that is really tragic is everything that is being done to label people like you and I, who are thinking critically. I made my medical decisions based on the papers I read. It wasn't just out of the blue, I'm going to do
Right.
it this way. It's like, no, that makes no sense to me.
Right.
I went and, pulled out papers and did some research on SARS and what that's all about, what kind of drugs work for against it and how effective they are. And all the things that I read, I said, okay, well, these things make sense. And these are the valid scientific papers. And so based on science, everybody talks about science until it doesn't matter anymore. But, when real science comes, they ignore that, but, whatever science they want to pull up, and somehow that science makes more sense than the real science. So anyway, you can sit there and thinking about, okay, well, my decision is based on science. So that's fine. Let's talk about your science versus my science. I think my science is pretty fundamental, real research-based science. So that's the basis of my thought of how I'm treating my patients.
Right.
Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go on this roller coaster ride with vaccines and whatnot and whatever, instead of suspending my belief that, no, these things are correct and these things are incorrect, I had to find some basis to have my, some foundation for my actions.
Right.
And that's the tragedy that I encounter, because I have so many patients that I treat. They, tell me, I went to this doctor, I went to this ER, I went here, I went there. They tested me positive and say, well, good luck and take care of it and call out if something happens. Like, they give you nothing? It's like, no. They tell me to go home and basically take some fluids and some Tylenol for fever, and that was it. It's like, you're kidding. It's like, yeah. They wouldn't give you any medications, nothing. It's like, no. This is how they're being treated. Until they get sick enough to come to the hospital, then there's a whole different protocol.
Right.
Which actually makes absolutely no sense. So basically, the people that I've treated, and it really goes into hundreds. I'm not some super doctor. I mean, I think I'm a fairly average, physician, and doing the kind of work. But I think I try to really make some sound judgments in terms of what I do. And so far, I guess I've been lucky, but all my patients have done very well. So question has to do with, okay, am I really, really that good? Or is the solution that simple? And I think the solution is that simple.
Right.
If it's really done properly with the right kind of approach and find the things that we know work, then the solutions are actually fairly simple.
Right. Right.
And that's all based, again, on sitting back and thinking, okay, what is right, what is wrong, and what is the basis of making these decisions?
And that's another thing that I just think I find astounding as well is here is a medical profession or physician like you are, and we're getting close to, I mean, for sure a year and a half. February will be 2 years, and you've treated well over 500 patients, and you've just followed the science and the research that is science, and you've not had a problem with one of your patients. And that's what blows my mind is that somebody will argue with that fact.
Exactly, right.
But yet they're going to listen to somebody that's not a physician,
Right.
that's never treated any patients whatsoever,
Right.
who's feeding a narrative, and they believe that.
Exactly. And
That's
they want you to believe it. They're forcing you to believe
That's what is
too.
mind-blowing to me. Because my personal belief is what somebody thinks has so much power.
Yeah.
And, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't.
That's right.
If somebody thinks that this vaccine is going to help them, and by all means they get it and they've got that philosophy. If somebody thinks it's not going to help them, by golly, they've got that philosophy, and there's a lot of power in that. But what scares me or concerns me is that the critical thinking of what you're believing, that piece is being left out of the equation.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I love how you said, let's talk about suspension of belief, because if you can talk somebody out of thinking, you can get them to do whatever you say.
Exactly. Yeah. Just program them into something else. Yeah. They become a robot.
That's what is scary to me and concerning is, why not talk to real people that you know? Why not, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that people listen to the TV, they just listen to the box. It's it's what Napoleon Hill calls drifting.
Yeah.
They just drift. And the critical thinking, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head today with that. It's the critical thinking that we've got to be promoting, that we've got to be talking about, that we've got to teach. Because some people don't even know critical thinking.
They don't understand what that is.
They don't even know
they don't
how
teach
to do
that.
it.
They don't teach that in
They
school
don't teach
anymore.
it, exactly.
It's really it's a technique in art. It's not that hard. I think we do it naturally, but it gets, I think, drummed out of them.
Right.
Because they're teaching things that are expected to be believed and accepted blindly.
Right.
It really is. It's almost like, it's just like, well, I'm going to tell you this. If you don't believe it, you're this. Or you're this. That you get a label, a negative label because you don't believe, what they're preaching. You
Right.
know? I mean, something as simple as thinking about just the idea that why did CDC change the definition of a vaccine? I mean, we had a vaccine definition for centuries, right?
Right.
We know what vaccines do, right?
Right.
That's what we know what the vaccine is supposed to do. But why all of a sudden they changed the definition of a vaccine to mean not literally mean nothing,
Right.
really, and then the ingredients of the so-called vaccine are out there. It's not some big secret. Anybody can go on Google and find it. And there's a whole list of stuff that's in there, and how much research does it really take? It doesn't take that much research power to find that, and then start typing in individual ingredients and find out what those things are.
Right.
I mean, the depth of knowledge is not that huge.
Right, right.
Anybody reading this will understand what the stuff is in there. And I think they'll start understanding, the thing that really makes something a vaccine really isn't in there.
Right.
That's fairly simple conclusion anybody can draw.
Right.
I'm not going to tell them that. It's like, yeah, here it is. Do your own reading, think about it, and think about how they're manipulating this to force you to go a certain way.
Right.
Okay, why do they need a mandate for certain things? When the experiment really hasn't been even done, And now what's interesting is there are new studies coming out now. It just came out, I think, yesterday or the day before, that the vaccines are actually less than 50% effective, and some are actually even like less than 13% effective. There are studies coming out now internationally that the media is not presenting.
Right.
They're not talking about this. Think about that. So-called vaccine, less than 50%, and some are as low as 13% effective. That's why they need the so-called boosters, which are not, they actually make it worse.
Right. Well, like we discussed before the show too, Joe Rogan, who's one of my husband's favorite podcaster, he's one of the people that he is huge on critical thinking. And that's exactly what he said is it doesn't make sense. If you've got a vaccine that is a 13 to 50% success rate, those aren't good odds.
No, not at all. Not even. Not even.
There's not good odds. And then, of course, it makes me think, even this conversation, if Mary was here, she would say, follow the money.
Money, exactly.
Follow the money.
Of course, yeah. We all know where that leads. Yeah.
Right. And that's, but again, that's critical thinking. And I can even remember growing up, my dad would say, and when we grew up in the summers, we used to leave the house and we'd be gone all day long.
Sure.
And my parents didn't even worry about us.
Right.
We were gone all day long, and then we'd come home at dark. We'd have lunch at one friend's house, we go to have a snack at another friend's house. We have dinner with another friend, or they'd come over to your house, But my dad taught us at a very young age, he would say, don't believe everything somebody tells you.
Yeah, exactly.
He would say, just don't believe. And he said one thing, and all of us remember this, is he said, if anybody calls the house or if anybody comes to the door and you're alone and they say that your parents have been in a horrible car accident, that we're here to get you because anything, he said, never believe them.
Yep.
Never believe them.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's not how we would operate the situation. But just those little seeds of think for yourself, critical thinking, and also talk about it, because that's how you teach. Listen, my kids are very I've got 3 biological and 2 bonus kids, and my 3 biological kids, they're extremely passionate about doing their own research. And I can't ever remember having a conversation. It's just the example that I set, and that I've always been talking about the right way to think. My dad was a professional athlete, and he always said, everything is controlled by your mind. There's nothing that you can't do. Yeah. There's nothing you can't learn. Yes, my mom would say, if you know how to read, you can learn anything.
That's right.
You don't have to be fooled.
Right. Exactly.
The critical thinking.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And suspending, and the willingness to suspend your belief.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's not even just suspension, but right now we're being forced to suspend our beliefs, but then we have to follow along with that and be willing to suspend it according to the wishes of the outer forces.
Right.
Those are actually 2 parts to this, and the question has to do with, that's a whole other topic later. How do you actually come up with the fortitude to actually support and stay with the things you believe?
I think you have to surround yourself with good people.
And the winds are against you, and everything's coming against you. And those parents that stood up against the school board was literally accosted by police, arrested and thrown in jail, being called a domestic terrorist. Unbelievable. These people are heroes. They knew what's going to happen,
heroes, exactly.
But they went there, they did it anyway, thinking, no, I have to stand up.
Right.
And we need more and more people standing up.
Absolutely.
And get these people out of the office and vote them out. That's the power that we have. And one great example is the recent election in Virginia.
I know.
The people literally stood up and said enough's enough.
Right.
And so that is a huge example that we all have power, and individually we do.
And we have to run for office.
Yes, I know.
People have to get involved in their communities in a more substantial way, because believe me, I know it's easy just saying, "Oh gosh, I want someone else to do it."
Yeah, exactly. It's always easy.
I know that's the easy way out to do that, but we don't have time for that anymore.
No, not anymore.
We don't have time for that anymore.
The stakes are way too high.
Right.
What's interesting is we just had election day. I mean, we didn't have anything to the degree that Virginia did,
Right.
but November 2nd was election day, and it's a little minor election. I think hardly anybody goes to that. I went
Right.
just to vote. I went
Exactly.
there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go see what this is all about, because this is the first time really ever I voted in a minor election like this, right? And I went there. There were like 8 or 9 different things. It's all about the
Right,
constitutional
right, the
changes
constitutional.
for the taxes and this and that, and giving power to this person and that person. It's like, oh my God, I'm glad I came, because number one, very few people vote. So 1 or 2 votes can make a huge difference.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I was like, man, this is unbelievable. What if this person had this power to do that? And that's one of the things that was on the ballot.
Well, and what I think is so important too is getting involved in groups, getting involved in meetups, getting involved with people, and you discussing what you're going to be voting before you go in there. Because there are times, I mean, I remember it was like in our house, when you turned 18, you're voting, and you're voting every single election. And that's how I was with my kids as well. And but I will say, I can remember, saying, okay, you're going to go in there and this is you're going to see, and this is, but we have to now go a step further, and we need to discuss what it is that we're going to be voting and allowing people to go and do their own research and do their own critical thinking as well. I mean, that's what they should be teaching in schools. That's really what should be teaching in schools. Hey, we've got an election coming up. These are the items that are going to be.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. And so we've got to do that with our kids. We've got to, and of course, I've got grown kids, and so thank heavens they still love me and want to hang out with me. Thank heavens I still have influence over.
Well, I
we're
think
very
it's because
close.
you set a great example.
We're very close, but you can't take these things lightly anymore.
Of course not. No.
You've got to be so much more involved. We all have to be.
Well, I think the last election, with the last mayoral election in Plano, I mean, it changed
Right.
from red to blue. I was astounded. What's really sneaky is they don't tell the party affiliation of the people anymore.
Right.
They hide everything.
Yes.
So when you look at everything, they all sound the same. And you have no idea where they're coming from. You have to really, 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 really dig deep to find out, okay, this person's Democrat, this person's Republican, this person's this and that, whatever. I mean, it takes a lot of work. But that's the only way you know how you're going to vote.
Right. And, I asked that question one time. I said, why, when you get to the local level, do they not have the party affiliation?
I don't know. That is the weirdest thing.
And what they said is because, I talked to some of the candidates that were running, it was very interesting because I just walked right up to one and I said, what's your party affiliation? And what do you believe in?
Yeah.
And they said, because I asked directly, they could tell me. But if I didn't ask them directly, they're not able to share their party affiliation.
That is unbelievable.
It's not. They can't put it on their website.
Why is that? I know.
And
you
they said that it's because at the local level they just want so much. They want everybody to feel good about. It doesn't matter who comes in.
But it does. It makes a huge difference who comes in.
It does. And so, we had Shelley Luther on the show about a year ago, which is amazing. And, she was the MC for an event not too long ago for the different people running in the governor race.
Right.
And it was phenomenal. But, even that needs to change at the local level.
Right.
But you do have to get involved in groups so everyone's party affiliation. And listen, they've got meetups. They've got the candidates that you can go do a luncheon with and this and that. But you got to dig for that.
I know. You have to.
You have to dig for that. And that it should be easy to access that information.
I mean, they have no really right to, block that for some reason.
Right.
But
yes, I know. I was blown away. I was blown away. But they said, I can tell you because you asked me specifically.
That is just incredible.
It is.
Yeah, they're making it harder and harder, all
Right.
this stuff. And I think, I guess the lesson really is don't lose that sight of really thinking,
Right.
because this is all we have. Everything comes from here. I mean, if you think about human history, obviously there's physical work, but physical work is based on thought. And of course, there's some random physical work, I suppose, but really all the work that matters comes from a thought, a logical thinking. You start from here, just go to there, step 3, step 4, et cetera, and it all comes from thinking.
Well, in a couple of episodes ago, we really talked about, we talked about loving one another. And you most certainly can love somebody that thinks differently from you.
Sure, of course.
You most certainly can get along with people, no matter.
Happens every day.
And so we've got to be unified. And that's another thing that really blows my mind is that the division and the hate and the anger. If somebody doesn't believe the same way, why? Why? We've got to love one another no matter what somebody believes. But we want people just to start thinking on their own. And that's really, I think, that again, that's the main issue.
Yeah, without that, there's no hope, because there's always people out there who have more power, who will take more power, and who will, basically use that power to manipulate situations to fit their agenda, not your agenda. And the only way to have any kind of voice and having a say in your agenda, your own agenda, is to have tools to fight back. And without critical thinking, there are no tools.
And I just am the type of person that I can't agree with having no hope. So we have to have
hope.
Always. We have to have hope. We've got to get into action. We've got to get into action. So it was a wonderful conversation.
Yes,
I can't wait to get Mary back when Mary comes back. That's one of the things we were saying today as well. Is I said, man, Mary is like a walking history.
She's the encyclopedia.
She
of history.
She is, and we are so blessed to have her with us. So
amazing.
we look forward to next episode having Mary back, and she'll lead the conversation.
Yes.
These are very important conversations to have, and I hope everybody that's listening shares them. Ask us questions. Let us know how we can help. I love to go speak at groups. I love helping individually. I love groups of people, and it's got to be based in love.
It is exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode with us. We talked about a lot of different things, but the core message was to develop your brain and develop your critical thinking. That really is everything that keeps us going and separates us from everything else. So until next time.
Live richly, love deeply.
Yes. And stay healthy. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us for this episode of Love and Health in America. Dr. Doohi Lee, Mary McMahon, and Jens Johnson are committed to help you achieve a life full of love, health, and abundance. Please join us in our next episode as we share another facet for you to optimize love and health in your life. Until next time, love deeply, live richly, and stay healthy.